Welcome once again to ST7 TV, and as we delve into the issues about a coup d'etat that happened in Benin yesterday, we made some investigations concerning this issue and we realized that they were able to go through all the processes that they can even do so that they can even um, get to the final destination which they were targeting. But unfortunately for them, there were another group of people who were able to counter the situation. So as I'm talking to you now, the people in Benin are now free. And let's go back to the system and check what is going on. From Tuntuum Network, you can also hear details about the information, whatever that happened within this period. Thank you.
National elections in 2026. On the 11th January 2026, Benin parliamentary elections will be held. And on the 12th of April 2026, their presidential election will also take place. Their current president, Patrice Talon, has publicly, in this year, stated he will step down and will not participate in the third term election. He will not. This should have been good news on all sides and allowed for peace and continuity to prevail. But guess what? No. Ladies and gentlemen, there are some other brewing issues in Benin for which reason there was an attempted coup. When you are going into an election and you bar the main opposition party from contesting, tell me, what do you expect to happen? And for some reason, this has become a new trend in elections in Africa. And every time, it doesn't end well. They want to bar the main opposition party. Yet politicians won't change their strategy. It happened in the Ivory Coast. It recently happened in Tanzania. It happened in Guinea-Bissau. And now in Benin, banning main opposition leaders. And parties. You, the president of Benin, has stated you won't seek a third term, which is a great thing. And on your way out, your party has formed a coalition with some other opposition parties, which is totally acceptable. It's good. But why do you still make it difficult and impossible for the main opposition party to contest? That is my question. Why do you bar them, the main opposition, from contesting? Ladies and gentlemen, Benin's Electoral Commission rejected the presidential election candidacy of the main opposition party called Les Democrats. And this was the reason given. Because they failed to meet the required level of sponsorship support among certain MPs and officials. You see, last year, Benin enacted a very, very suspicious electoral law. Under this new electoral law, which the outgoing president has approved, a presidential candidate must be endorsed by a certain threshold of elected officials. And those elected officials come from parliament, which they call deputies, or must come from chief executive officers of a municipality, which they call mayors, before the candidate can be on the ballot paper. Think about that. Do you see where the problem is coming from, ladies and gentlemen? Because in other words, it will mean that before you are approved by the Electoral Commission of Benin to contest for president, specifically for president, you must already have people or seats in parliament who will endorse you and support, and also get support from chief executive officers of a municipality. Their endorsement must come in before you can be on the ballot paper as a candidate for presidency. Meaning, if a person doesn't have such people or seats in parliament or support from such officials, they cannot compete in a presidential election in Benin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the whole story. And in the case of the bad main opposition party, which is the LD party, they needed 28 endorsements from certain MPs and officials. And they had exactly that number until the 11th hour for their submission. And one of their endorsers or endorsed parliamentarians pulled out. So the application was rejected by the Electoral Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, I have watched and listened to the different videos and in circulation concerning Benin's failed coup. And I see this one incident, which is the bad opposition leaders, as the center of the problem, even though the soldiers provided different reasons. For your information, the soldiers in the announcement of the coup provided 4 reasons why they did what they did. I'm talking about the Benin coup. The first reason was because of the continuous deterioration of security situation in northern Benin with rising threats from jihadists and militants. That was their first reason. Their second reason was they complained that many soldiers who died or were wounded in combat had been neglected and that their families were being left to fend for themselves. Ladies and gentlemen. And then the third reason was about unjust promotions at the expense of the most deserving, which suggests, ladies and gentlemen, a widespread situation of favoritism and mismanagement within the armed forces of Benin. And the fourth reason being their grievance in the mismanagement of the country Benin itself as a whole by the civilian government. This is their stated reasons, and that couldn't make it or cut it for me as good enough to be the reason to want to remove a government. All over in sub-Saharan Africa, the problems they listed are everywhere. Corruption within the armed forces isn't a new thing, and soldiers who have been neglected after serving their country is normalized actually in Africa. This is a major problem even in my own country, Ghana, which junior rank soldiers complain about all the time. Some complain of retirement packages after serving their countries for at least 3 decades, not even being up to $40,000 after 3 decades. Others complain of receiving less than 30% of their international mission money paid by the United Nations. These are complaints out there. These are legit problems to deal with within the armed forces of many countries in Africa. Therefore, I couldn't be sure that that was the main reason behind the attempted coup. But the new electoral requirement and the rejection of the main opposition party was something I personally thought could have been the main cause for this coup. The new requirement makes it hard or maybe impossible for opposition parties, especially those with few seats or weakened local presence, to meet the threshold and therefore cannot contest for president in Benin. This new electoral law will bring chaos to Benin every time they have to go into a presidential election. And it was enacted by this same president who is on his way out. It appears the ruling government is using the same democratic system to ensure it becomes impossible to have an opposing party take over government. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a problem moving forward in Benin. Mark my words. So as it stands now, there were 4 main contenders in this election for next year, but 2 have formed a coalition. The other 2 are seen as parties that are already in bed with the ruling government. So the election is predicted to go in favor of the ruling government. Ladies and gentlemen, Francophone Africa is on a new spree. One by one, they are choosing military rule over civilian, and the reasons are the same all the time. Most of them are poor. Poverty in Africa is widely spread among many French-speaking African countries. Do your checks. And these are countries whose history shows their leaders were in bed with France. It appears the people are fed up with that kind of an arrangement. And the progress made by the Sahel states, particularly by Burkina Faso, has become a reference point for what they want to achieve individually. This is why the West wants to do all that's possible to eliminate Traoré. The longer Traoré stays in power and the better Burkina Faso becomes, the more other African countries will like to follow suit in his approach, and the more coups will occur in Africa, which will break the control of the West over us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the whole truth. But Traoré will live, and he will prosper in his cause and continue to inspire the rest of the continent. The coup at this point is foiled, and that means a treason case for all the soldiers who participated in it. That would be nasty. The loyalist forces of the ruling government stepped in right in time to rescue the situation. That's the story we have been told by the Interior Minister of Benin, Alassane Seydou. As to whether This will be enough to keep the armed forces in check in Benin and prevent a subsequent coup. We wait to see. Benin is 14.8 million population. They have a relatively small country and all that it will take to become a prosperous nation. Ladies and gentlemen, what's missing is the same thing that's missing from the rest of all sub-Saharan African countries, which is good leadership. Until we all make that good leadership a priority, this cycle of try and error will lead us nowhere. Stop voting for people because they are from your tribe. First of all, stop. Or stop voting for people because they look better, and pay attention to their plans, their politics for the nation first. Make decisions based on their agenda and strategies and hold them accountable every step of the way, no matter how you feel about them. This is how we will win as a continent. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. I'm Cyrus and this is Tuntuum Network in Accra, Ghana. Be sure to subscribe and click on the bell if today is your first time watching us. I'll see you in the next one very, very soon. Until then, may the Lord help them. It is bye-bye for now.